the first video of 2025, which means it is time to look back at the year that was and, well, give my thoughts on the top anime series that I watched in 2024 that aired in 2024. As with all of my lists, this is a unranked list, and I'll be talking about older shows that I watched or shows that I covered on the Anime Explorations podcast. I'll discuss those on the December episode of the Anime Explorations podcast. I'm recording this before then, so we can kind of we'll probably do a bit of a year in review on that episode, but I won't be talking about that here. So, if you didn't listen to that, or you weren't listening to the podcast, go listen to it. And you'll get David and Tora's thoughts on for the year that was as well. So, with that in mind, let's begin. First, a quick honorable mention for shows and films that I had not gotten around to watching this past year, which are very much on my to-watch list. For example, I never quite got around to watching Look Back on streaming, or Gridman Universe when that became available, or watching even some series like Machina, Too Many Losing Heroines before I put together this list. This doesn't mean I didn't like those shows or wouldn't like those shows, I just hadn't gotten around to them yet, and I may get around to them in the year to come. Also on this list is Thunderbolt Fantasy Season 4. We've been covering that show on the podcast, and I was looking forward to Season 4, but as of this recording, in, again, December of 2024, that series has not been licensed for a US release yet, for some goddamn reason. Now, I'm not going to say I was into Dungeon Meshi, Delicious in Dungeon before it was cool, but I did include it on my anime recommendations for RPG players video back when all we had was the manga and the anime had not yet been announced. As far as the anime version goes, the series by Studio Trigger lived up to all my hopes, which were pretty high considering it's by Studio Trigger, and I was ecstatic to learn that the show is getting a second season. Hopefully, Netflix will not do their usual nonsense for multi-season shows and will let this story proceed through the entirety of the manga. The second season of Oshi no Ko was in an interesting spot. On the one hand, this is a series which is following a banger of a first season, which kicked off with a really emotionally intense and impressive opening episode, really well played out story, and also with an opening that probably was one of the biggest bangers of an OP in anime history, by which I mean the song placed #1 on the Billboard Worldwide charts, which certainly helped get YOASOBI a slot on Coachella, and arguably helped Creepy Nuts get a live session on the Grammy YouTube stage with Bling Bang Born after that song went viral. Season 2 had more of a gradual start, with Aqua taking part in a 2.5D stage play, and in turn getting into his own psychological trauma and how that impacts and informs his acting. However, the back half of this series did a tremendous job of getting back into the initial hook of the investigation of both the murder of Ai Hoshino and of Aqua's past self, Garo Amamiya, and in turn does a solid job of kind of amping up to a degree Ruby's own trauma related to this. Aqua, if you recall, was the one who was in the room with Ai when she was murdered, while Aqua was on the other side of the door, and she could hear it and kind of see an impression of it through the glass, but wasn't actually able to, was not there when it happened. So the murder kind of hit her differently. The conclusion of the season almost feels like it evens out the trauma some in a weird way, but not get too much into that because spoilers. But really great season. Definitely recommend checking it out. One of the phrases that come up among mecha fans is they don't make mecha anime like this anymore. Until suddenly they do. Brave Bang, Bravern is a pastiche of super robot anime like the long-running Brave series, which includes Brave Express Might Gain, which you might recall from my Super Robot Wars V Let's Play, and King of Braves Gao Gai Gar, which was the franchise's final installment. Now, Braveheart isn't a sequel to that storied franchise, but it has the blood of that franchise in its veins, with commitment to a hot-blooded super robot action in a semi-real world setting, accompanied with direction by Masami Obari, who also worked on GaoGaiGar. Even if I give away the twist of the intervention of a self-aware super robot in the series' first episode, or the intense homoeroticism of the various aspects of the series, up to and including the show's closing credits, there's so much more I just don't dare mention, because when you encounter it for the first time, each one will keep you going, wait, they did what? Throughout the series, all the way to the final episode. It's not in the sense of it keeps you guessing, but it keeps you surprised, which is also a wonderful thing for it to do. Now, I missed the boat on Spice and Wolf when it first aired, the original series, and also when the novel started coming out in English, but when the series received a new adaptation with the subtitle Merchant Meets the Wise Wolf, I figured now is the time where I needed to jump on board. Not just had to, not just wanted to, but needed to. And I was not disappointed. The chemistry between Lawrence and Holo is tremendous, and the various economic, business, and political challenges that the two have to overcome with each story arc works tremendously well. Also, because Spice and Wolf is much more clearly a fantasy setting, the ways that the show handles medieval and early Renaissance economics tends to do a decent job of reflecting the historical side of things, but because it's in this fantasy framework, it doesn't bump me from the story the same way, as opposed to something that tries to much more heavily plant itself in with a sense of historicity, like Orb, can throw me from the series when the reality of what happened, for example, the conflicts with the religious and scientific conflicts over the spread of the heliocentric model did in that show. Brief tangent here. Galileo was excommunicated. He did absolutely get in trouble with the church, but it was related to his observations of the Jovian system of satellites along with Saturn rings that got him into trouble, combined with the book that he published, and how and simply how in that book he handled alternatives to the opposition viewpoint for heliocentrism. Specifically, he was very caustic about it, and he put it was requested by the Pope, Urban II, I believe, to include the arguments, the counter arguments in the work to the heliocentric model, and he put them in the words of a character named, I shit you not, Simplicico, who was depicted as basically a drooling idiot. And depending on depending on the historian you talk to, or the historian who writes about it, Simplicico is also written as a thinly veiled, written as a parody of Pope Urban as well. Which, look, I'm not saying that that's an excommunication worthy effect. It's not. But on the other hand, I do feel like a certain Jim Croce lyric applies here. Is if you're writing something that doctrinally is putting you at risk of legal trouble, you're basically being asked to, hey, put this, you can still publish this stuff, which is, at the time, rocking the boat considerably, but we need you to put the Aristotelian stuff in there as a kind of we now know false, and he knew false. Galileo knew false. Aristotelian model as an alternative viewpoint. Like, there's saying this is the other model. I think it's incorrect, or here's the other model. I have evidence to show it's incorrect. It's another thing to say this is the Aristotelian model, and the people who believe in this also possibly at this point haven't actually read your book and your documentation of your findings. people who believe this are morons. That's asking for trouble at this point in history. I should specify in in the Renaissance. That's asking for trouble. Anyway, Spice and Wolf season 1 is great. Looking forward to season 2. Tangent about orb aside. Moving on. Wrapping things up, I have the series that is still airing. That as I write this, in terms of the series on this list, this one is still airing. But having read ahead in the manga and being current on the show as of my time recording this, I feel confident including this in my top series of the year. And that series is Dan to Dan. Yet the animation of the show is tremendous. The show also, writing-wise, this comes from the manga, balances humor and pathos with skill and grace. Yes, that first episode does get a little rough with how the risque content is executed in it, but it speaks volumes that when the series gets to, by comparison, more risque by episode 9, it's done in a way that doesn't feel leering or gross. It fits in and leads to a tremendous comedic payoff that doesn't feel, again, pervy. It feels just funny. Science Saru has done a tremendous job adapting the story to the screen. As I record this, we have not been heard if the show has been greenlit for an additional season. Certainly, there is enough material, based at the pace that the current season's going, for probably another 12 to 13 episodes, so I hope Netflix has faith in the anime they're producing, and that we get a season 2. Certainly, of the series I've discussed here, this is one of the few where I have heard discussion of this show among people who don't normally watch anime. I would argue that Netflix has done a solid job promoting this, and it's working. People are watching this and watching it beyond the first episode. So I would hope that that would be the thing that has Netflix go, yeah, let's do more. We shall see. And those are my 5 picks for the year. If there's anything I missed that did not come up over the course of this, so not including like Orb, but say, for example, if there's a show that if, like, for example, this year's version of this year's season of Is It Wrong to Meet Up in a Dungeon was actually like really super good, let me know in the comments below. I have a very long to watch list, and I'm trying to get through some of that through my each year's basically anime New Year's resolution. And I've been making progress on that this year. Or I made progress on that in 2024. I expect to do pretty well for 2025. Fingers crossed. But yeah, let me know what you'd like to recommend, or just recommend either to me or to anyone else in the comments below.
Thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed the show, please like and subscribe. And also consider backing my Patreon. Patreon backers get episodes up to 1 week early of this show and any future Let's Plays. Also, please consider backing my Ko-fi. Tossing me a few bucks also helps support the show, and it's not a monthly obligation or anything like that.